Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Katherine Calvert. She is the CMO over at Khoros. Katherine, how's it going today?
It's great. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Logan.
Absolutely. You and I have already had a roaring conversation offline. I am so excited that we get to continue this conversation about the connection between customer engagement and customer experience. It has been a topic that, of the things that I post on LinkedIn, there was one the other day just about the customer experience based on people connecting to a Wi-Fi at a local mall here. And it just got a lot of engagement. I think it's a very important topic, and I'm really excited to share some insights that you guys have on the topic today. Before we get into that, the research that you guys have done alongside Forrester, before we get into any of that, I would love to provide some context and background. Katherine, tell us a little bit about your own marketing journey and what you and the team at Khoros are up to these days.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Khoros, and Khoros is, for those of you who've been in marketing for a long time, the product of Lithium and Spreadfast, two companies that have been in the digital customer engagement space for a while. So we do social care, social marketing, and communities. We help some of the biggest brands in the world in both the B2B and the B2C side to connect the dots with their customers and stay always connected so that they can have customers for life.
Awesome. I love it. Katherine, we're going to be talking about 3 specific findings out of a recent study that you guys commissioned with Forrester. Before we get into that, I would love to have you speak to a little bit of the why and the how of this study. Who did you guys talk to? Why was it important? And then we'll get into some of the findings, which I think are going to be really telling with some of the stats you have to share today.
Awesome. As a marketer, I pride myself on being a great storyteller. But I think you certainly and my colleagues out there doing this job around the world understand that my most perfect paragraph, my most perfect tagline is meaningless if it's disconnected from the real experience that my customers have with my company, with my brand, with my solution. So we knew it was an issue, but I wanted to figure out how to quantify it. So we worked with a third party, Forrester, the world famous analyst firm, to commission a piece to try to quantify that connection gap. So we talked to 2,000 consumers and over 200 brands globally, B2B companies, B2C companies, to say, hey, is this a challenge for you? Do you feel heard and are you easily able to connect with your customers? And on the customer side, how do you feel the state of your engagement is with the brands you either know and love or want to know and love, but are frustrated by? So that was the project. It was really fun to be able to put some numbers to this challenge. And what came back was no surprise in that, yes, there's a gap. The gulf, the size of that chasm, Logan, was what was shocking to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you and I were talking through some of the stats offline, I was blown away by this first stat. And that is, as you mentioned in this study, you talked to brands, both B2C and B2B, about their level of engagement with their customers. And then you spoke to customers, both and consumers and folks who are buying from B2B brands. What is their experience of engagement with the brands that they're doing business with? And the perception difference between those two was pretty shocking. So speak to that a little bit, drop some stats on us.
Yeah. So I think, marketers are naturally optimistic. So almost 90% of us, almost 90% of the brands we talked to said, we're committed here and we're pretty good at meeting our customers where they are, whether they're on social media channels or messaging or on our own branded properties. Unfortunately, what consumers told us is that only 15% of them felt heard. So 90% of brands felt they're doing a pretty good job, and only 15% of consumers felt that they really were known and heard. And when we double clicked on that, what we found is that on the brand side, people have projects and energy, and we all know, right? Whether it's us on the marketing side of things or my colleagues on the care side of the house, we all know this is super critical in a world where people can get stuff from anywhere at any time. Creating loyalty and great experiences is going to be the differentiator that will drive success. So all of us have projects dedicated to knowing our customers better, to mapping the journey and connecting those dots. And in fact, I think 80% of the brands we talked to felt that they, or not just felt, have dedicated projects around this, but only less than half felt that their systems were actually talking to each other. So they're dedicating resources, they're buying solutions, but they might be point solutions, or I've got a stack on, the marketing team might have one tech stack and the care side might have another tech stack, and they're not connecting the dots, which then leads to that disconnect or that connection crisis for the consumer on the other side, who might be getting marketing messages that make sense and map to their journey, but don't map to their ongoing care experience with the other side of your house, right? But they only know you as one monolithic brand.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know we're big proponents of putting out original, organic content on LinkedIn. But one thing that's always been a struggle for a team like ours is to easily track the reach of that LinkedIn content. That's why I was really excited when I heard about Shield the other day from a connection on, you guessed it, LinkedIn. Since our team started using Shield, I've loved how it's let us easily track and analyze the performance of our LinkedIn content without having to manually log it ourselves. It automatically creates reports and generates some dashboards that are incredibly useful to see things like what content's been performing the best and what days of the week are we getting the most engagement and our average views per post. I'd highly suggest you guys check out this tool if you're putting out content on LinkedIn. And if you're not, you should be. It's been a game changer for us. If you go to shieldapp.ai and check out the 10-day free trial, you can even use our promo code B2B Growth to get a 25% discount. Again, that's shieldapp.ai, and that promo code is B2B Growth. All one word. All right, let's get back to the show.
You mentioned to me another stat kind of along those lines where I think we've probably, and this reinforces the stat that you're going to share here, we've had a bad experience with a brand. We hopped off the phone frustrated after, an hour-long customer support call with our internet service provider. Let's, just pick
Right.
on that sector for a little bit, but it really could be anybody. And then we see an ad about how great the brand is. There were a number of respondents that specifically called out having that sort of experience, right?
Yes. So, and some of the world's biggest telecom companies are customers of ours. And I can tell you firsthand, they are working so hard to do this well and to be there and responsive and create great, delightful experiences. So what part of the selfish reason I wanted to do this study is to say, gosh, I know it's not good when this happens, but what does it really mean? And the really shocking piece for us was that 65%, so well more than half of customers said that if they have a bad experience, they're going to stop doing business with that brand. 65% will walk away. So not only are you losing that customer, but you're probably putting $1 in your competitor's product because they'll go somewhere else to solve the problem. And then, what keeps us marketers up at night is that they tell other people about this problem. And it's not just like you tell somebody on your train ride home, right? That's the curse. The blessing is when things go well, we have these big platforms, but the curse of all these channels is that when something something goes wrong and people want to complain, they have a massive audience to do that. So 64% of customers said they will tell others about a negative experience they have with a brand. So you're losing 65% will walk away. And most of those folks will also tell others about a bad experience.
Yeah,
So it's
there's
very
only a
costly.
1% difference there
Right,
between walking away and telling others. So
Right.
for pretty much all of that,
Right.
2/3 of folks that have a bad
Mhm.
experience you're not only getting the bad effect of losing the business, sending the money to your competitors, but damaging the brand along the way as they tell others, depending on, their social media following. But still, regardless, I mean, I just heard on another podcast episode, actually on the customer experience podcast, where they're talking regularly about customer experience, a bad interaction with a clothing retailer, and there was that point of losing out on the money from that individual, the family. Now it's been talked about on the podcast. I heard the story. Hundreds of other people, if not thousands, who downloaded that podcast episode have now heard it as well. So just from my own experience in the last couple of days, I've experienced that stat that you're talking about right there, Katherine. So we talked about the divide between what brands think they're doing, what consumers are perceiving, the cost of getting it wrong. The flip to that, as you mentioned, with the blessing and the curse of social media and all sorts of channels for us as marketers, is that there is a corresponding upside to when we get it right. So speak to that connection between positive customer experiences and something that all marketers are trying to tie themselves to and set their eyes on more dedicated here moving forward, and that is revenue, right?
That's right. We're all in it to attract and retain and grow our customer relationships, right? And so that's the good news here, is that it's so hard to do, but that when customers do have a positive experience, it matters a lot. So loyalty is possible. It just means you have to get it right. So to give you the stats about how this is really creates tons of upside for your business. When a customer, it's so rare these days. So when a customer has a good experience, they are 43% more likely to buy something from you. So we're increasing the likeliness of purchase by 43%. And then back to the blessing side that you mentioned, Logan, they also told us half of them have recommended a brand in the last 6 months or less. So those people that will tell you about unhappy experiences are just as likely to tell you about positive experiences. And that lift for your brand is so valuable. It is worth 10x your media spend when you have another customer talking about the great experience they had with you. So just to put a final point on that, 83% of those thousands of consumers we talked to said they are more loyal to brands that create positive experiences, to brands where they feel known and that they feel connected to and heard. 83% of them feel loyal. And that's pretty magnificent in a world where loyalty is so hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to something that you mentioned earlier, a quote. I probably won't quote him perfectly, but David Cancel, founder of Drift, says all the time, in a world of infinite supply, brand is your ultimate differentiator. And as marketers, we get excited about rebrand. We get excited about the things, the creative exercise of displaying what our brand is and represents. But at the end of the day, it's really what people are saying about us that we have no control over. And that's really what our brand is. And so I think there can be this disconnect of, we can just create this great brand with all of our efforts, but it's not just that. It's the experiences that we create. And to your point, the glass half full side of that is that there is a tremendous amount of upside. There's more loyalty. There's competitive differentiation. There are people who are willing to spend more money with you as opposed to getting into this endless price war. So I would love to hear your thoughts, Katherine, on kind of next steps for marketers thinking about this, how they could work with their other functional leaders within their organization. You talked a little bit about, connecting the dots of the customer journey and realizing that it doesn't stop at the bottom of the funnel, right? At decision, at that point, especially for those of us in tech and ongoing recurring revenue-based businesses, that is really the mid, if not just the beginning 1/3 of that customer journey. So give us a couple of thoughts there for folks that
walking away from this to do something about these stats and what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, and I love that quote, Logan. So thank you for sharing that. And I've had the privilege of getting to rebrand companies or redesign logos, and all of that is really important work. But to your point, as marketers, we're really shepherds of a brand, but the brand itself is defined by the experiences your customers have. And so to that end, the companies that we work with that are doing this really well have figured out how to reach across the aisle and create visibility into and across different functional groups so that you're known as a customer, not just in marketing and in my demand gen funnel, but also in my CCO or CCO's organization. And I have a system and a record so that I can understand what matters to you, what you care about. When's the last time you called in? Was it to buy something, or was it to solve a problem? Did the problem get resolved? And honestly, that makes my promotions much more intelligent, right? Because then I can do really cool things with targeted promotions, targeted thought leadership. I can get really creative with things that will help you be more successful using my solution, right? If I know who you are, my marketing gets better and my care staff gets better. So 3 things that I think will help other brands to do well that we've learned from the customers that we work with that are doing this really well. One is we all do customer journey maps. Make sure that it's a cross-functional exercise, and that when you are in that room and working with your Post-it notes and mapping the journey, that you're also thinking about what all those external touch points are, so that you have one cohesive view of all the ways that you are reaching out to your customer as one brand, not as a team, but as a brand. And what are the ways and entry points for that customer back into your business? And then the second piece would be, once you have that line of sight, how do you bring them together? You probably have a great CRM. Is it capturing all those digital interactions? Because each of those interactions, we like to think of them as pieces of currency. And if you can drop them into your CRM, you're going to get you're investing in the future of that relationship. So a cross-functional look at your prospect customer journey, breaking down the silos across your own company, so that, again, we don't want to change anybody's workflow, but you're able to have line of sight between those inbound and outbound. And then the final thing would be to make sure that the top brass of the company is thinking about this. It's obviously a key initiative for your marketing team, maybe, or for your care organization. But if you're feeling stuck and you can't get traction on this within your team, it probably means it needs to get elevated. And so hopefully some of the stats we shared can help you build that business case. But if you don't get that senior level perspective, I know from experience it's really hard to forge through and break those silos across organizations. So happy to help and share our Forrester data with anybody who's looking at how to build this kind of business case.
Yeah, absolutely. Katherine, as we wrap up today, I want to point folks to some additional resources here. Something that came to mind throughout our conversation is a phenomenal book by Joey Coleman, Never Lose a Customer Again. I would definitely recommend that as follow-up reading on this topic. Another, some folks know that we have a #CX series here on B2B Growth for, a deep dive in full episodes on that show. Check out the Customer Experience podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening. We'll link to both of those, the book and the podcast, in the show notes here. Katherine, if anybody listening to this would like to follow up, stay connected with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to get access to this data and the report that you guys put so much time and effort into?
Sure. So I'd love to meet any of you in the out there in the social world. So you can find me at KP Calvert on Twitter. You can also always find us at Khoros.com, KHOROS.com, and it should be pretty easy to find a link to the Forrester Report. But if you can't find it, feel free to ping me on Twitter and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Awesome. Fantastic. We'll try and put that in the show notes as well. We'll make it as easy as possible. We're going to try and lean into the customer experience, the listener experience today, right? Let's see how easy we can make it on everyone out there. We would be remiss with this as our topic today to not really lean into that as we finish out and share our parting words. Katherine, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.